it comes to lunch and you see what's in lunch boxes and you see, kids embarrassed to eat or not wanting to eat, or the food, that they're thrown into their lunch boxes, or the choices that they've made. You put two and two together and you see, what nutrition does in, I guess, an academic space.
Welcome to the In and Athlete podcast. I'm your host, Trent, and this is the show where we dive into all things youth athlete development, strength and conditioning, and the mindset needed to thrive on and off the field. Whether you're a parent looking to support your child's athletic journey, a coach seeking fresh insights, or an athlete ready to take your game to the next level, you're in the right place. Before we jump in, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our latest episodes. If you enjoy the show, please give us a like, share it with your friends, and help us reach even more people who can benefit from these insights. Together, we can empower the next generation of athletes to perform at their best. Now, let's get into it. Welcome back to the In Athlete podcast. I have a special guest here, Ange Alexandrakis. Hopefully I got that right.
You got it.
She is first of all, a teacher, but also a sports nutritionist specializing working with youth. So first of all, thanks for coming on to the podcast, Angie. And I want you to just give us a bit of a scope of the work that you do, then who you actually work with this topic. Obviously going to be more about, nutrition and sports nutrition and working with younger athletes. Just give us a bit of a background of how you actually got to this point as well, because I always find it interesting to hear how, obviously I got into strength and conditioning because of what happened when I was younger. What was kind of your background of getting into this space?
Yeah, well, firstly, super happy and very honored to be on the podcast. So this is fantastic. I guess the background starts a bit early on for me from when I was a teenager. So currently now I'm an accredited and registered sports nutritionist, and I primarily work through my business, Athletic Fuel School. And so I do mainly work with youth athletes and athlete development programs, but I wasn't an elite athlete growing up. I mean, I did participate in sport, but I struggled mainly with nutrition and body image. So I guess these issues really impacted me throughout adolescence, and then, eventually any goal or hope that I had with sport, that was put on hold. And so, sorry, after high school, I went straight into teaching. I mean, I didn't really have any other career in mind at that point, but I was still dealing with a lot of the fallout from underfueling. And so I knew I had, I guess, that passion for nutrition, but it got to the point where I wanted to do something with it. So eventually I went back to uni full-time teaching, full-time studying, which probably wouldn't recommend, but I mean, you just do it. I got my Bachelor in Nutrition and Exercise Science. And then I think I started to notice that there was that gap in understanding between my students and what a lack of nutrition can do, not only, on field or in sport, but in the classroom. And so applying what I also learned in my own life, it sort of showed me what massive changes could happen. And it made me really excited to, work with the students that I was working with and work with athletes in a school setting to see how they can benefit themselves, within their sport. And so starting Athletic Fuel School allowed me to bring that information into schools, allowed me to start working with academies and clubs to give students that power to make decisions for themselves. And yeah, that's where it began.
Awesome. So it's really just, you kind of figured it out, seeing the impact of poor eating habits and what they're actually leading to within the school setting.
Yeah, I mean, when you're sitting in a classroom with students struggling to concentrate, and then it comes to lunch and you see what's in lunch boxes, and you see, kids embarrassed to eat or not wanting to eat, or the food, that they're thrown into their lunch boxes, or the choices that they've made. You put two and two together and you see, what nutrition does in, I guess, an academic space. And then, yeah, I guess that sort of intrigued me to look at it more in the route of performance. And, when you have students that are athletes and they're telling you what they were doing on the weekend and how fatigued they are, there's no chance you're getting anything out of them academically, but you're also really wanting them to, pursue their interest. Yeah, you just, I guess, seeing what connection could be done there.
Cool. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit more about the habits and overcoming challenges and setting up youth athletes for success. So let's go back to Athletic Fuel Schools. Like, what are the trends and habits you've obviously seen, and now you're working with a few more higher level programs? Are you seeing that across all levels as well with the current trends in terms of like the lack of education or reinforcement or resources? Like, what are you seeing at the moment?
I think, look, firstly, in the sports nutrition space, trends are massive. You've got these social media pushing, playing a major part in that. I think the most common one I'm seeing is this quick fix approach where, there's overly restrictive diets coming in, focusing only on one macronutrient and not looking at the whole picture of an athlete. You've got so many athletes, especially these younger ones, which are so misinformed or undereducated about, the importance of having a well-balanced diet, but also being able to include these foods that people love to demonize or really, deem as being ultra processed. And so with Athletic Fuel School, I guess that point was there to really change that narrow focus, open people's minds up, even when it comes to parents as well, how they view nutrition, and just provide a bit more of a sustainable approach to nutrition. Because especially with youths, it's not just about hitting macros or following a certain diet that they see, but it's about fueling for long-term athletic development, and then having these strategies that are lifelong. Because yep, they might not continue in sport for forever, but now they've got this foundational knowledge that can be applied to all aspects of their life.
And then how do you talk to them about in terms of driving adaptation? So obviously training, eating to train is one thing, but then we want to drive specific adaptations as well. So how do you go about having those conversations with the athletes?
Yeah, I guess it starts even earlier where we're looking at just consistency of eating, because that's also, I guess, when we come back to trends, that was a massive one that we're seeing, that, kids are just not eating at regular times. But when we get into that, I guess, foundation of regular eating, then you can start looking at, okay, how can we use food around, during, and after training to, create those adaptations, whether you are looking to improve your speed, your power, performance, whatever it might be. When you understand, I guess, that proper nutrition gives you that energy for your intense workouts, you understand how it supports recovery, how it allows you then to adapt and improve even better consistently over time. I guess if you look at specific nutrients like carbohydrates, that's a massive element of an athlete's diet when it comes to providing energy to, better your speed or your power or performance. If you're not constantly refueling yourself in that way, you're not really going to see any changes, because there's been this, I guess, limitation in topping up your energy stores.
And then how does that affect the mental side as well, the mental performance? So obviously the brain, is processing all this information, whether it's training, in school, or even in sport. Like what are the actual mental demands? And then how does poor nutrition actually play into that dip in mental performance?
Yeah, it plays a massive role, and if people, choose to ignore that or not, it's a clear sign. When I go back to carbs, our brain and our body love carbohydrates, so that is its preferred source of energy. So if we're needing that to make decisions, we need to concentrate in school, on the field. If we're, needing faster reaction times, without that proper fuel, we're not going to get any of those benefits. And so poor nutrition strategies, sorry, when it comes to underfueling or not having a good balance of all those elements, that, carbs, protein, healthy fats, color, and, your micronutrients, that's going to decrease things like your blood glucose levels, where it's going to affect our brain function. And not only does that affect our mood and our cognitive, functioning, whether we're trying to concentrate really hard for a test, or whether we're trying to, you know, adapt that to our sporting situation where we need to make judgment fast, or we need to concentrate, or we need to have great focus. All of those are now suddenly impaired because we're not eating regularly, we're cutting out carbs, or whatever it might be. But then I guess you see the other hand, where you're consistently fueling, you're consistently getting that intake of energy throughout the day, and you're seeing a massive improvement. You're concentrating suddenly, you can stay awake in class and also perform on field. You're sharp, you're alert, you've got all these extra benefits now that in turn, you're going to feel better. Your brain is going to be a lot clearer. You can make those decisions moving forward.
Awesome. And then share with us if you have any like stories of any individuals, obviously, keep the names out and
Yeah.
whatnot, of like when you've kind of like first worked with them, like give us a bit of a case study of like when you first worked with them, a couple of interventions, maybe one or two interventions, and then how do they come out afterwards, moving forward?
Yeah, I think one comes to mind, was a 16-year-old youth athlete I had. I think I found just a lot of resemblance in what I was like growing up. She came to me struggling with fatigue, so she was in one of my athletic fuel school sessions at school, and then reached out afterwards and was telling me, fatigue. She's never felt the exhaustion, like this feeling in her eyes that is like wearing her down, and this consistent, I guess, inconsistency with performance. She could never match to what her teammates or people that she knew at her age she should be doing that exact same thing. And so sitting down and working through, all right, let's see what's just our regular meals and what is our regular pattern of eating. Well, we're skipping meals, we're not having breakfast, we're embarrassed to eat at school in front of our friends, or it's just not a priority. So nutrition firstly was not the priority, and that just led into this cycle of low energy at school. You have to go train after school, you've got low energy there, your recovery is getting slower, she's getting sick pretty much every couple of weeks, and you've got those low level injuries which are probably just as annoying as recovering from a big injury or strain or tear. So from there, we just started to introduce a fueling strategy and a fueling timeline. And the main focus for us was regular eating patterns, but then more specifically looking at pre training nutrition. And if we could at least focus on one particular time around training where we can get any food in that's obviously a nice, easy to digest carb. And most likely, those carbs are a lot more inviting for youths to eat, we can get some sort of feeding in. And yeah, from there, I mean, you notice one small thing in training that you can take to a game, and you notice, wow, I've made a massive improvement. What did I change? Implementing some sort of fuel. Yeah, so from there, you work on one element of a fueling timeline. We introduced the intra training, really delved on a post training nutrition, and I guess the turnaround of that fatigue and that exhaustion was that massive difference for her.
Awesome. Sounds like she's done.
She really well.
Yeah, she did really well. It's funny. I have a funny story of a kid who, not an athlete as such, but he'd come in training because his parents wanted him to be active, and he wanted to be in the gym, get stronger, and all that jazz. He was in year 8, and then he said he'd always get in trouble in the afternoon, like after lunch. And I'm like, it's like, first of all, I reverse engineered it. It's like, all right, what time are you waking up? Oh, I'm waking up about 10 past 8. And I'm like, all right, what time do you have to leave for school? I'm like 8:30. I'm like, in that 20-minute window of you waking up to leaving for school, are you eating anything at all?
No.
And it's like, oh, I'm grabbing like a Milo bar or something like that. I'm like, all right, do you think that's an adequate amount of energy for you to be able to study throughout the day? And it's like, probably not. No. Then after when we had for recess, you'd have something pretty minor as well, and then lunchtime you'd have something pretty minor as well. So all we did was like, hey, let's wake up 20 minutes earlier. Hey, let's just get a bowl of cereal, whatever you like, just something to start off the day. And funnily enough, he stopped getting in trouble in the afternoon.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's it.
because what I've noticed, obviously, if we're not eating, you know how everyone gets hangry, everyone gets irritable. It's just the same thing with kids.
Exact same.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
It's interesting where in a primary setting they allow for times like a brain break where you're in the middle of class, you're allowed to go get something to eat, but the moment you hit secondary school, eating, it's like no chance. You can't have anything in class to eat. Get rid of it. You can't finish off your recess. There's no time to finish off lunch. And in the time where they're the most active, recess and lunch, they're not sitting around eating their full meal. They want to go, they want to move around, they want to chat to their friends. And the emphasis on, refueling isn't there. So you come to that last period of the day, and, teachers love to call that like the witching hour, because they are either dropping in energy because they've had something, super high in sugar, they've run around, whatever it might be, or they've just not eaten at all. And now you've had to deal with a classroom of these incredibly tired kids that are most likely exactly hangry or just, starving to eat.
So leading on from that, like how important you mentioned in your case study, like the frequency as well. It's like Is frequency more important with kids these days as well? Just because, they are getting pulled in multiple directions, whether, before school curricular activities, during school, they might have sport during school and then after school as well. Do you find that frequency is actually becoming more important now?
Do you mean more so like the frequency of eating across the
Yeah, the
day?
frequency of eating, because you mentioned about the brain break side as well. Is that becoming more important, or something that you've noticed as a general trend?
Yeah, for sure. I think consistency of fueling is pretty underestimated. Like when you look at, I guess, a full day of a youth, you're realizing you've got school to get to. You probably have PE during the day. If I'm working with youth athlete development programs, they've got another gym session or a training session during the day and after school. So if you're not using those sort of unique fueling opportunities before and after these active moments, then you're not getting that chance to top up your carb stores. And so entering each new training cycle is probably going to feel more and more exhausting because you're not taking advantage of those little breaks. And so talking with some of the schools, they have incorporated times to give kids, or remind kids 30 minutes before their training session to get something in, or stop that session 10 minutes early and make sure they've got a post-training snack so that they can go to the next session. Because that's the hard thing about, I guess, those programs in school. The opportunities to refuel aren't there. And that's where I guess the accountability on the athlete does have to come into play. But for sure, I guess that regular eating pattern is important for anyone, just to keep those feelings of being hangry away, but also to make sure you're not going for extended periods of time without fueling, so that you avoid those, I guess, feelings of fatigue, exhaustion.
So it's almost like we need these windows of snacking, essentially.
Yeah, it'd be so different if schools allowed for that. I mean, not just for athletes, it'd be so interesting to see just in general what behavior of kids could be like. But it's a whole other issue there.
Yeah, I might actually coin that term,
Yeah,
window snacking.
indoor snacking.
That's a wrap for part 1 of this episode on the Inner Athlete podcast. We've covered some incredible insights today, but there's still so much more to come. Make sure to tune in to part 2 for the rest of the conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, give us a like, and share it with your network to help us reach even more listeners like you. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you in part 2.